Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a really tough subject, but an important one. It's the tragic murder of 16-year-old Miranda Corsette.
hmm
And this case, well, it really opens up some serious questions about the dangers that can hide in, online spaces. It's a story we need to understand.
It absolutely is.
Hmm.
Miranda's story is just heartbreaking. Young mother living with her grandmother down in Florida, and when she vanished, it kicked off this truly horrific series of events.
Yeah.
And looking at the sources we have, the articles, the legal notes, it helps us get a grip not just on the awful things people did, but also the bigger picture,
Yeah.
online safety, protecting vulnerable people.
Exactly. We've gathered quite a bit of material, articles, investigation notes, court documents, all spelling out the crime, the investigation, the legal side of things.
All right.
So our goal here in this deep dive is to walk you through these sources. We want to unpack the timeline, who was involved, the criminal case, the civil suit, and maybe most importantly, the really big questions this raises about holding these online platforms accountable.
It's definitely complex. But going through the material piece by piece, you can really start to see how different things intersected. Miranda's own difficult situation, what the perpetrators did, and crucially, the role the technology itself played.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. Miranda's life, the vulnerabilities she might have been dealing with already. Who was Miranda?
Well, she was just 16 years old, homeschooled, and she'd been living with her grandmother in Gulfport, Florida. She'd lost her parents.
Right.
And incredibly, she was also a mother herself. She had an 11-month-old baby. That's an enormous amount for any teenager to handle.
A huge amount for someone that young, absolutely. And the sources we looked at mentioned she had a history of running away sometimes.
Yeah, that detail does come up. And the material suggests that, unfortunately, this history might have made her grandmother hesitate, maybe not report her missing right away this time.
Thinking she might come back like before?
Perhaps hoping she would, yeah. But obviously this time was tragically different.
And didn't her cousin, Deneen Wetton, speak out publicly, raise some concerns?
Yes, she did. After Miranda disappeared, the cousin talked about what she called Miranda's shady past. She mentioned worries about Miranda's mental health, and specifically fears she could be exploited, groomed, or trafficked.
Wow.
There's also a claim from the cousin that, initially at least, the local police were supposedly reluctant to get involved because of this so-called shady past.
That's a really significant point, isn't it? That a young person's background, sadly, might actually hinder them getting help quickly when they're in danger.
It really highlights a potential issue,
Yeah.
how we approach vulnerable youth, especially those with complicated histories, when they go missing. So if you put all that together, her age, her family situation, being a young mom, the running away history, the mental health concerns, it really painted a picture of someone already in a very vulnerable position.
Which just makes what happened next even more awful. This is where the story turns really, really dark. The sources say Miranda was, quote, lured through a social media app.
That's the terrible start, yeah. The app was later identified as Grindr. It's generally described as an LGBTQ plus dating app.
Okay.
And Stephen Gress, the man who was eventually charged, he claimed that when they first connected on the app, he actually thought Miranda was 21. But later, he found out she was only 16.
And the first time they actually met face-to-face was Valentine's Day.
February 14th, yes. Gress picked her up, took her to his place, a duplex in St. Petersburg, and then brought her back home that same evening.
But she ended up going back there.
She did. According to the information we have, the very next day, February 15th, Miranda went back to Gress's place, this time apparently on her own. And she stayed there with Gress and his partner, Michelle Brandis.
And she stayed for nearly a week before things turned violent. There was some kind of dispute, the sources say, over a missing ring around February 20th.
Yeah, and this detail about the ring is incredibly disturbing because investigators later found zero evidence that Miranda ever stole any ring. Not only that, but there was a third roommate, someone living downstairs in the duplex. This person claimed that Brandis actually found the ring in Gress's car, but only after Miranda was dead.
Yeah, sure.
After. And this roommate apparently suspected Brandis might have had it the whole time.
So the whole missing ring thing, it might have just been completely fabricated. An excuse.
That's certainly what the evidence seems to point towards, yeah. That the ring was possibly just a pretext, a made-up reason to start the violence that followed.
Okay.
And from that point on, Miranda was reportedly held against her will for over 7 days and subjected to just brutal torture and beatings.
And this wasn't exactly a secret, was it? This is where it gets even more chilling. Who knew this was happening?
It truly does. The sources we reviewed state that 6 different individuals supposedly knew Miranda was being held captive and being tortured in that house.
6 people.
6. And not one of them called 911.
6 people knew and nobody made a call. That's almost unbelievable.
It's a deeply, deeply troubling failure to intervene. Gress himself even admitted sending photos. 5 photos of Miranda.
Photos.
Yeah. Showing her nude, bruised, her condition getting worse and worse. The final one, her head was apparently so swollen she was almost unrecognizable. He sent these photos to 2 men and also to his own mother, Jacqueline Christich.
He sent pictures like that to his mother.
Mm-hmm. And none of those 5 people reported it to the police either.
His mother got these pictures showing torture and did nothing.
That's what the sources indicate. His mother apparently even acknowledged that her son had a history of killing animals, but claims she never actually looked at the photos he sent her.
Wow.
It just points to this really disturbing level of detachment, maybe enabling, whatever it was. It had horrific consequences.
The reports say the torture stopped around February 23rd, and investigators think Miranda was killed somewhere between the 20th and the 24th.
How? How did she die?
The method described is suffocation. Based on the accounts, it involved forcing a billiard ball into her mouth.
Oh my. And then wrapping her face with plastic wrap. Gress later claimed he told Brandes not to cover Miranda's nose, but that she did it anyway, and he said he couldn't stop her.
And after the murder, their actions somehow became even more depraved.
They really did. Gress allegedly took Miranda's body to the home of Brandes' mother, over in Largo,
Okay.
and the evidence found there suggests that's where the dismemberment happened. Gress reportedly used a chainsaw to dismember and decapitate her body,
A chainsaw.
and Brandes then allegedly put the remains into trash bags.
And the callousness just, it keeps going.
It does, in a detail that's just stomach-churning, really.
Yeah.
On February 24th, Gress, Brandes, and that third roommate allegedly drove around with Miranda's remains in the trunk of the car.
Where were they going?
They went out to celebrate Brandes' birthday. First, they stopped at a Popeyes restaurant. Then they went to play miniature golf.
With her remains in the trunk.
With the remains in the trunk. It shows an extreme level of dehumanization, doesn't it? Yeah.
Completely. Then they drove, what, about 50 miles south to Ruskin in Hillsborough County to get rid of the body.
That's right. They disposed of the remains in a dumpster there. Investigators believe the contents of that dumpster likely went to an incinerator or maybe a landfill. And they're still, even now, actively trying to recover Miranda's body. It just shows the ongoing impact of how they handle things.
So, okay, Miranda's reported missing Feb 24th. How did the police investigation finally lead to Gress and Brandes? The break didn't come until March, right?
Right. The real turning point was around March 6th or 7th. That's when the St. Petersburg police got a critical tip from a witness.
A witness tip.
Yeah, about a possible kidnapping and homicide involving the missing girl. That tip seems to have been what really kicked the investigation into high gear. The police chief, Anthony Holloway, called the crime horrific.
And Gress, interestingly, he was already in police custody by then on other charges.
He was, yeah.
Oh.
It's kind of a twist. Gress had been arrested back on March 5th, so a couple of days before he was charged with Miranda's murder.
And those charges were unrelated.
Completely unrelated, it seems.
Yeah.
Aggravated assault, apparently, for pointing a harpoon at Michelle Brandes, ironically.
A harpoon.
Yeah. And drug possession. So, because he was already locked up, it probably made him much easier to find and question once that homicide tip came through.
Okay, so he was charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping on March 7th. What about Michelle Brandes?
She turned herself in the next day, March 8th. And she faced the exact same charges.
Sure.
First-degree murder, kidnapping.
What kind of evidence did the police piece together for the case?
Well, they found physical evidence related to the dismemberment at that Largo house, Brandes' mother's place.
Right.
The search warrant affidavit also detailed the information about those 6 individuals who knew about the captivity and torture but didn't report it. Gress admitted sending the photos, remember? And crucially, one of the people he sent them to actually gave those photos to the police. That would be incredibly powerful evidence.
Absolutely.
And then you have the testimony from that third roommate that seems absolutely vital, detailing the suffocation, moving the body, the dismemberment, the disposal. And the sources also mentioned that Gress and Brandes were apparently trying to blame each other during police interviews.
Classic deflection. So where are things now, legally speaking, for Gress and Brandes?
Okay, so both of them are currently being held in the Pinellas County Jail. No bail. They've both pleaded not guilty.
Okay.
The prosecution has stated they are seeking the death penalty for both of them.
Hmm.
The judge hasn't ruled on that specific request yet, though. Their next scheduled court hearing is July 8th. And the investigation itself is still considered ongoing, so there's always a possibility of more charges down the line.
And even though they haven't recovered Miranda's body yet, the case can still move forward.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Finding the body is always, the goal. It provides definitive evidence. But in Florida, like many places, you can definitely prosecute and convict based on strong circumstantial evidence and compelling testimony.
Right.
And this case seems to have a lot of circumstantial evidence, backed up by those key eyewitness accounts, especially from the roommate and the photos.
Okay. Now, shifting gears a bit, beyond the criminal case, this whole tragedy has sparked another major legal battle. This one aimed at the tech platform involved, Grindr. There's a civil lawsuit.
That's right. A family member, identified as DW in the court papers, filed a civil suit. They're acting on behalf of Miranda's estate and the family. It was filed against Grindr LLC on May 18, 2025, in federal court.
And what's the core argument in that lawsuit? What are they claiming?
Basically, the lawsuit argues that Grindr shares direct responsibility for Miranda's murder. They're pointing to two main things: what they call Grindr's lax age verification and its hyper-precise geolocation features.
Okay.
The specific counts listed include things like wrongful death, negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and even participation in a sex trafficking venture.
So they're not just saying the user, Gress, was the problem. They're arguing the app itself, how it's built and run, was fundamentally flawed.
Exactly. That's the crux of it. The complaint alleges Grindr failed to implement adequate safeguards to keep minors off its platform. It claims they didn't use what it calls industry-standard age verification.
Like requiring an ID or something.
Yeah, like government ID scans or maybe facial estimation tech. Instead, the suit claims Grindr relied on a farcical self-reported age verification system.
Just check a box saying you're 18.
Pretty much. And the argument is that letting a minor onto an adult platform like this, especially one with Grindr's specific features, led to what they call foreseeable catastrophic consequences. The suit also claims Grindr had allegedly been warned for years and years about children and minors getting on this platform.
Now, isn't there usually a big legal shield for websites and apps? Section 230 that protects them from what users post?
That is the huge hurdle, yes. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act generally gives online platforms immunity from liability for content created by their users. It's a cornerstone of internet law.
So how is this lawsuit trying to get around that?
Well, the legal strategy seems to be focused on arguing that this isn't just about user content, like Gress's profile or messages. They're framing it as a case about Grindr's alleged negligent design and operational failures.
Ah, okay.
Specifically, the lack of robust age checks and how the geolocation feature allegedly facilitated the harm. They're trying to argue that the product itself was defectively designed or operated in a way that foreseeably endangered minors.
So it's like arguing the car manufacturer is liable if the brakes are faulty, not just the driver who crashes.
That's a decent analogy, yeah. They're trying to say Section 230 immunity shouldn't cover situations where the platform's own choices about its features and safety mechanisms or lack thereof directly contribute to predictable harm, especially to kids. They want to narrow that Section 230 protection.
And the lawsuit specifically calls out the combination of features as being particularly dangerous.
Yes, that's a really key point in their argument. The suit emphasizes the danger created when you combine hyper-precise geolocation, knowing exactly where someone is, with lax age verification. It argues this mix creates a perfect storm, making it easy for predators to find and target vulnerable minors they meet online. The suit also suggests that Grindr's marketing, which might emphasize anonymity or secrecy, could be misleading about how safe the platform actually is. It really highlights this tension, doesn't it, between features users might want for privacy and the absolute need for strong safety measures, especially when kids might be on the platform.
So what exactly is the family seeking through this civil lawsuit?
Well, they're asking for a jury trial, and they're seeking significant financial damages, $150 million in compensatory damages, and potentially up to $600 million in punitive damages.
Wow, huge numbers.
Huge numbers. But it's not just about the money. They're also demanding court orders to force Grindr to implement much stronger industry-standard age verification methods and to start making what the lawsuit claims are misleading statements about safety on the platform. The family's attorney has explicitly said the goal is to cause change to prevent future tragedies.
Has Grindr responded officially to the lawsuit yet?
Based on the sources we reviewed, Grindr hadn't filed its formal legal response in court at the time those sources were published. However, Grindr has made public statements before, like in a post from January. They talk about having a multi-pronged approach to try and keep minors and predators off the platform.
What does that involve?
They mention things like age-restrictive settings, an age gate, though the lawsuit obviously questions its effectiveness, user reporting tools, and also human moderators reviewing things.
Okay. So, stepping back again, looking at the whole picture, what are the bigger takeaways here, the broader implications of this terrible case?
Well, first and foremost, it's just a chilling, tragic reminder, isn't it, of the very real, very extreme dangers that young people can face on online platforms, especially dating apps, if there isn't strong age verification. It really hammers home how crucial it is for parents, guardians, to be aware of what kids are doing online, to have those tough, open conversations about the risks they might face. It's a harsh reality. And Florida, where this happens, sadly, is noted as having a particularly high number of tips about suspected child predators.
And that civil lawsuit really throws the spotlight back on the platforms themselves, doesn't it? Their responsibility.
Absolutely. This lawsuit is really testing the limits of platform accountability, especially with Section 230 in the background. It reflects this growing feeling, I think, in society that these huge tech companies need to be more proactive about safety, not just reacting after something awful happens or relying on self-policing.
Right.
It shows the gap between how fast technology moves, like these apps with super precise location tracking, and how slow the law and regulations can be to catch up. It's a real call for what people are calling safety by design.
Building safety in from the start.
Exactly. Building protections right into the core of the product.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it points to a need for actual legislation to set some baseline safety standards.
And that other disturbing element, the failure of all those people who knew Miranda was being tortured but didn't call for help. That speaks volumes about community responsibility too, doesn't it?
It really does. It's a powerful, awful lesson about how vital it is for everyone to be vigilant, to know how to recognize signs of abuse or danger, and crucially, to report it. That simple idea, prevention beats tragedy. If you see something, say something. It could literally save a life. The silence of those 6 individuals and Gress's mother. It's a stark example of the devastating consequences when that responsibility fails.
So when you put it all together, Miranda's own vulnerabilities, which sadly aren't unique among young people facing tough times, and you combine that with the specific features of the app, the alleged lack of safeguards, it really did create this perfect storm of risk, didn't it?
That's the tragic heart of it, I think. This case makes a powerful argument that online safety isn't just the user's job to figure out, especially if the user's young or vulnerable. It's fundamentally connected to how these platforms are designed, what protections are built in, or, maybe more importantly, what protections aren't built in.
Yeah.
It really suggests that developing this kind of technology needs more than just engineers. It needs safety experts, ethicists, maybe psychologists who understand vulnerable populations, and frankly, how predators operate.
This whole case, as incredibly difficult as it is to talk about, really stands as this stark testament to the very real dangers, the devastating dangers that exist in our digital world today.
It's a hard truth, but one we absolutely have to confront.
So our deep dive today, it wasn't just about recounting the horrific events. It was about trying to understand what this tragedy tells us about the digital world we live in, the vulnerabilities within it, and maybe our collective responsibility. We've looked at the awful timeline, the criminal case against Gress and Brandes, and this major legal challenge now facing Grindr.
And all those layers of failure that contributed, right?
Yeah.
The actions of the perpetrators, yes, but also the shocking inaction of those who knew what was happening, and these bigger questions about how our systems respond or don't respond and how these platforms are designed.
Which really leads us to a final, pretty critical question for you, the listener, to think about after this. How do we strike the right balance? How do we balance fast-paced tech innovation and the features users often want, like anonymity, like precise location sharing? How do we balance that with the absolute non-negotiable need to protect the most vulnerable people from predictable harm? What does real safety by design actually look like in the future of how we interact online?